Hello, my friends. Welcome to the greenhouse at the Elliott Homestead. If you joined us last week here on the channel, you know that we finally got the greenhouse cleaned and heated, and we've now moved our citrus trees out here, which seem to be doing really well. And that's great because now it's time for us to move on to the next task in the garden, which is planning and setting goals for the year ahead. Before we dive into specific goals that we have here on our homestead garden, I would like to thank Babbel for sponsoring today's video. Here's the thing, in life there's things you're always going to be a student of. If you love gardening, you are forever going to be a student of your garden. And one of the things that I love that I will forever be a student of is learning Italian. You can click the link below the video or scan that QR code to get 60% off your subscription with Babbel. Here's the thing. We set goals, we have to have ways to achieve them. Practicing language every day with Babbel is a very easy way for you to achieve your goal. I would love to hear in the comments what language you've been wanting to learn. There's a lot to love about Italian varieties of vegetables and a lot to love about the Italian language, which is what I am learning with Babbel. One of my favorite parts of learning Italian is combing through my old Italian recipe books from various regions that I love. Il cibo della campagna è fantastico. Lo cucino tutti il tempo. Babbel makes it possible for me to practice my Italian whether I'm inside in the kitchen or outside in the greenhouse, wherever you are. And their live classes are taught by native speakers, which is really essential. Babbel is proven to start helping you speak a new language in just 3 weeks. So click the link below the video, scan that QR code, get 60% off your subscription, and start learning. Don't forget, they offer 20-day money-back guarantee. Before we dive into the goals that I have for my garden, I want to just take a minute to encourage you. I know a lot of you who engage here on our channel are gardeners yourselves, but I also know that a lot of you are just starting out. You may have aspirations of having a big vegetable garden or planting fruit trees and creating a food forest, or, we all kind of set about with different goals. The problem is that a lot of times people will come to the channel and they'll learn how to do things in the garden or enjoy it and not actually ever do it. And I don't want that to be the case for you this year. If you've been wanting to dive into gardening, to learn about it, just go for it. If I had a nickel for every mistake in the garden, you guys, we would be very rich. I remember the very first time I started seeds, I did pepper seeds, tomato seeds, pea seeds, and lettuce seeds all in the same tray, not giving any thought to certain varieties that like things cold, or certain crops that like things really hot, or even how many weeks before the last frost date I just got excited, got some seed packets and planted it. And you know what? It wasn't the best crop I've ever had, but I got some from it and I learned something from it as well. So if you've been, just aspiring to do something like this, just go for it. Put the seed in the ground, order a few small things. And here's where I would begin. I would start small. Pick just a few crops that you want to learn how to grow. Maybe you really want to try your hand at homemade lettuce, or maybe just having a tomato in a pot and some fresh herbs would be enough for you. Maybe just start with 6 things, write them down, and then just learn a little bit about each crop. It doesn't have to be a lot. For example, eggplants like it hot. Peppers need to be started quite a long ways before the frost date, unless you're going to go buy starts from the store. So just do a teeny bit of research, figure out what those 6 crops that you want to grow need, and just go for it. Don't hold back. Don't be worried about making a mistake. Don't be worried about a crop failure. It's going to happen. It still happens to me and every gardener. I think what gardeners have is a tenacity to just keep going every year. We talk about the amnesia that gardeners experience this time of year, where we're aspirational and we are setting these goals and we're forgetting that August heat is going to come and those September weeds are going to come. And right now we're just feeling optimistic about what's ahead, which is good because it gets us back into the garden every year. So set your goals, set them small, set them manageable, and go for it. Let's talk a little bit about what's going to go down in our homestead garden this year. Years ago, we put in our no dig garden, which is to the right of where I'm sitting right now. and I have been so pleased with how this garden has gone for us. So if you're not familiar with the no dig method, I'll put a link below the video to Charles Dowding's YouTube channel, which is where I learned about the no dig method, and I just can't say enough good things about it. The theory is really that instead of tilling the ground and disrupting the soil, you're just adding onto it each year. So instead of tilling this huge plot of land for our market garden, we just put layers of cardboard down and then compost or wood chips depending on top. And so we put compost where we planted things, and then we put wood chips where our pathways were. This has worked really, really well for us. The problem is that no dig really only works if you keep adding things onto the surface of the soil. This works as a mulch to hold in moisture, stamp out weeds, and I've been pretty lazy about doing this, which means that I am due for an order of compost and an order of wood chips so that everything in the market garden can get a good top dressing before spring comes. So this is going to mean a lot of shoveling, but frankly, one of my goals is to keep things a little bit tidier than I have been. I tend to do really well, like most gardeners, in the spring and in the early summer, and then when the heat comes, I just get bogged down and I get so focused on getting the harvest out that things get a little wild, which is how I left the garden, sadly, last fall. So now that my greenhouse is here, I'm able to put all my pots, all my seed trays, all my tags, all my tools right here next to the garden, which is going to be great because I need to get a little bit more disciplined with keeping things a little bit tidier, keeping track of my things, making sure that all my supplies get brought back to safekeeping and not just left out. It can get a little bit bad. So first goal is to keep things tidier, to take really good care of what I have, and to make sure that it stays that way all through the year. It's going to take a lot of work, but I know I can do it. My second goal is to turn over beds. This is a problem because I'm so motivated by beauty that, say I have a beautiful bed of arugula that's long gone to seed. Arugula is a cold weather crop, so as soon as it starts to heat up, it tends to go to seed. And I think the flowers are just so beautiful, and look, oh, they sway in the wind, that I'm not very aggressive about ripping it out and replanting it with something else that can tolerate the heat. This has been a big problem for me because then when things go to seed, they cause all kinds of chaos in the garden. So my second goal in my homestead garden this year is to actually use this greenhouse, which is both heated and fanned, to grow transplants so that I always have the next crop that's ready to go in, so that when that arugula has gone to bolt, maybe I have pepper transplants that are waiting to take its place. This means that my beds can go through potentially 2 or 3 crops per year versus just going through one and then letting it be pretty for a while, which I have flower beds for that. There's plenty of pretty elsewhere. This vegetable garden is meant to grow food. That's what the goal is. So I need to get a little bit more aggressive about making sure that I start in here. You know, it's again, one of those funny things where you think once you have a garden, oh, I'll just go get my transplants on Saturday and I'll put them all in on Monday, and that's that. And that's just not the way it works. I've already started some cold weather crops in here, like green onions and arugula and spinach and the like. And basically, I need to be sowing seeds from now through, now that we have the greenhouse to grow in, maybe through next winter even. There should always be a crop that's ready to go into the ground so that I can move things through. Even in the very late summer, once the tomatoes come out, garlic can go in, lettuce can go in, arugula or spinach could go in. Cold weather crops can replace warm weather crops instead of just letting them die in the beds and not touching them at all until the spring, which is a bad habit. So do as I say and not as I do. But my second big goal for the homestead garden this year is to use more rotation, to get crops in the ground and to get spent crops out of the ground faster. This is going to increase our yield a lot. My third goal this year, again, I got to tighten this up every year, is to only focus on growing the foods that we want to eat. It can just be really hard when there's really pretty packages and they have little pretty pictures on them of colorful things. And And that's great because it keeps me excited about gardening. So there's certainly a place for that. But I have learned in my, I don't know, 15 years of gardening, vegetable gardening, that tomatoes, greens, all manner of greens, potatoes, and onions, those are my top crops. So greens could be anything from arugula to lettuces to mustard greens to kale to collard. I grow all different kinds. There's some that do well in warm weather, some that do well in cool weather. But tomatoes, they are it in my garden. They are the goal for me in my garden. And so I'm going to give them more space. I really did try last year. I went from having 60 plants to having 12, got the same yield just by giving them more space and being really good about harvesting them. This year, I would like to add just a few more, but I'm gonna have to space them out even further. They just take up a lot of room. So I'm gonna prioritize growing paste tomatoes. These are tomatoes that don't have a lot of liquid and seeds inside, which means these are the ones that I cook down and can into passata and into just whole canned tomatoes. These are the tomatoes that we eat all winter long in so many ways. So these genuinely are my number one crop. Preserved tomatoes are my number one priority from the garden. After that, it's potatoes and onions because these are essential crops all year round for us. We never don't have them. We never don't eat them. We gotta have them. And so that means that I'm growing a few different varieties so that if one of the crops fails, one of the varieties failed, there's other ones to take its place. Again, this happens. Sometimes I have a really good purple onion year. Sometimes I have a really good white onion year. I grow green onions, like fresh spring onions, white ones, yellow ones, pink ones, purple ones. I grow a lot of different varieties. Okay, so tomatoes, greens, potatoes, and onions, those are my priorities this year. And so as I think about my efforts and as I allocate bed space to each of these crops, those are given, they're the cream of the crop. They get first choice. They get exactly where they'll be happiest, whether that's because it has the deepest soil or because it gets the most sun. But when I'm planning it, I'm going to set those priorities because those are what I like to eat. And then lastly, so I have 4 goals this year. And my last one is to really beef up my herb garden. And I want to show something to you. So this is a really cool packet that I got last year and used, and I'm gonna use it again this year. I'll put a link to it below the video, but this is a collection of medicinal herb seeds from Survival Garden Seeds. The cool thing about these seeds is that they're all heirloom and open pollinated, so you can save seeds from these plants and the seeds will grow true to the parent plant, which you can't do with hybrid seeds. But they've done a really cool job of just putting together really common ones that are easy to grow from seed, like mugwort or peppermint, plantain, marshmallow, sage, marigold lavender, toothache plant, lemon balm. I mean, there's so much here. And I was really intimidated growing herbs from seed for a long time, and I'm not really sure why that was. But everything that I've tried has grown really well. So this year I really want to expand my knowledge of tinctures and salves and just kind of using these things medicinally, drying the herbs for teas throughout the winter. And so we put in our herb garden a few years ago, and now I just want to beef it up all the more. There's still some bare patches of ground, and I want it to be just like an herb jungle. And then I want to be experienced enough to be able to go in and say, okay, here's my mugwort and here's what I do with it every year. So I'm going to plant some of these seeds. I'm going to work on beefing up my knowledge and learning new plants and learning new methods of growing these seeds and harvesting them. So maybe we go ahead and do that. Okay, 4 goals. It's gonna be great. All right, I'll show you my little seed starting station here. It's really quite simple. I keep a little tub of dirt. It's way easier to work with than working with soil in bags. And so I'm gonna plant some stinging nettle. This is a really good one. Culinarily, you can put it in ravioli or tortellini. You can also use it as a tea. So whatever container I'm using, you can just scoop it in super simple. And these are the ittiest bittiest little seeds. you can see the planting depth says 0, which means basically it needs almost no soil to germinate. And so what I'm going to do is just sprinkle. I'm going to just sprinkle them on the surface of the soil. And then these will germinate, and I'll just transplant this entire thing out. So once it has a root system, it can just be transplanted out into the herb garden. Now, because this is just such a teeny seed, it doesn't need much, I'm just going to sprinkle it enough, which is going to allow the light in. And I press it to make sure that the seeds have contact with the soil so they're not just free floating in there, because they need to have contact with the soil to soak up the moisture. If you think that you're going to remember what's in all your containers, you will not. So take the time and invest in some tags. I love these little wood ones, and I just write what it is, nettle, and then on the flip side, the date I planted it. And this is how I start a lot of my crops. So sometimes I'll even do things like lettuces in this exact way, and then once they've sprouted and they get a little bigger and a little sturdier, then I'll transplant them onto a cell tray. But there's also some crops that I start in a cell tray. Let me show you what that looks like. So I introduced you, if you've been watching this channel for a while last year, to these seed trays, which I cannot say enough good things about. I'll put a link to them below the video. I get these from a company called All About the Garden, and they were actually designed by Charles Dowding, the no dig kind of creator. And basically he just got frustrated with how cheap the trays were. And gardening is one of those things, when you have nice tools, it's really helpful. Turns out there's a reason that we designed seed trays a certain way. You can see how rigid it is. So if you hold it, it doesn't flop down and your seedlings fall out. It also doesn't, get damaged by sun or cold. It just stays like this. They're still in such good condition. So same thing, I put it over my soil and I just fill it. This just makes it go a little faster. And then what I like to do is just gently press my fingers around, which helps the soil to kind of pack into the little cells. This is called a cell tray, obviously, because it has little cells as opposed to just being a big old tray. See how much nicer that is when you can just clean it up, keeps it a little tidier. Then what I do is I just come in with my fingers and just press. So I'm not measuring, a quarter of an inch or a half an inch. The idea is just that some seeds need to be underneath the soil to germinate. Pretty simple. Okay, so I told you that I was a little scared of growing herbs from seed, and sage was one of those that I thought you just had to buy a start, but not is the case. I planted sage last year from seed, and it went really well, and I just love it so much. I love the way it smells, and even if you don't harvest it, I just love the way it looks in the garden. It's really beautiful. These are nice sized seeds too. So I just add, if you've got good germination rate on your seeds, just 1 or 2 per cell. Pretty simple. By the way, you certainly do not have to have a greenhouse to start your seeds. I was telling you about my first time I ever grew any sort of vegetable. It was mine and Stuart's first year married. And I had a little tray of seedlings, all my mixed seedlings, on top of our microwave, which is funny because we haven't had a microwave in, I don't know, a very long time. And they were barely next to a window. And of course they got all leggy because seedlings need a lot of light to germinate, or they'll just grow and grow and grow, reaching for the light. If I can dig up the picture of those seedlings, I was so proud of them. I'll share it here so that you guys can see it. But my point is, I started my seeds in my kitchen, and that was what I had for a very, very long time. And it's totally fine. These little plastic tables work great if you just set them up, Put them where there's a lot of light. Your seedlings will be just fine. Okay, sage is all planted. Just a little bit of potting mix over the little sage seeds here. A little pat down so that they get good contact. A tag so I don't forget. Now, the cool thing about these seed trays is not only how durable they are, but they also have these perfect fitting watering trays, which is just very convenient for keeping your seedlings moist. You don't want them to get dry. So let's move these over to the transplant table. So this is my table where I have some of my crops that I've planted already. These are all cold weather crops because it's still pretty cold outside. And my irrigation's not on, so that just means I need to bring water up in my little watering can here. And I don't need to water them often because it's not very hot. But the seedlings do need to stay moist. So I just come up every few days, give everything a little water to keep it moist. This tray is interesting. I'm attempting to grow some microgreens in here to see how it does. Probably my very favorite part about having a greenhouse is that for years I had all these inside, which is fine, but I also had dirt and water everywhere because inevitably when you water, you spill it. Now, take note, do you see how when I water this, the water kind of just stays on top? It takes it just a moment to saturate down into the soil, but in order to get the seed wet, we want it to be nice and saturated. So just take a step away, check on everything else, come back and water it again, maybe a few times, until you can tell that that water is actually going down into the soil. One of the things I love about gardening is that it's never the same year to year. Your goals are always shifting. The varieties that you want to grow, the things you want to eat, that's always shifting. It makes you a student, and it kind of just puts you in a posture of appreciation for all the things that land can do for us, for all the things that these beautiful crops can do for us. So maybe this is going to be your year to get your garden started, get out there, put your hand to something, and grow something delicious and beautiful.